Hello and welcome to the Heat Check podcast, the Miami Herald's Miami Heat podcast. I'm David Wilson. I'm joined, as always, on the other line by Anthony Chang, our Heat beat writer here at the Herald. Anthony, it's not going great.
No, 1-4, worst start since
Not ideal.
Worst 5-game start since 2008. Yeah, this is not the start anybody envisioned. I think when this season started.
Yeah, I mean it's we'll obviously get into it. It's our first time recording since the season began. A bad 5-game start does not mean that the season is lost, obviously, by any stretch. I think as our colleague Barry Jackson pointed out on Twitter today, like we thought this team was dead a whole lot of times last year. I don't know if we should just say that just because that happened last year, we should expect it to happen again. But again, it's early. But at the same time, man, it just feels like this team is, kind of an MO of the Heat. I think of kind of the Jimmy Butler era. Really, you could probably just say the Heat generally is like they're a team that kind of always would find ways to win. To me, the thread through 5 games of the season is they're just finding so many ways to lose games right now.
Yeah, I mean, their only win is a 1-point win over the Pistons at home in the opener. They're a 1-point win away from being 0-5. I mean, who would have thought that, right? And yeah, like they've dealt with injury issues early on, which is I mean, one of the bigger storylines, for the first week of the season, because this team was very injured last year. They led the league they led the league or second most missed games due to injury last season. Mm-hmm. This year, they're probably up there already. They missed multiple rotation players every game so far this year. And that's played a role. It's not an excuse, but it's played a role.
Yep.
Tonight, they lost to a Brooklyn team that was missing 3 starters.
Yeah. Tonight is like the worst. We're recording right around midnight on Wednesday after the Heat blew how big did the lead get? Was the lead in the fourth quarter? 20?
The biggest lead was 16. They led by 15 in the second half.
15.
Led by 8 at the start of the fourth quarter, and they're losing by 4.
Yeah. So, and obviously Jimmy Butler plays, Bam plays.
Yeah.
They've got their starting lineup pretty much.
Tonight they were only without Caleb Martin, Kevin Love. Yeah. And Brooklyn was without Cam Johnson. They were without Nick Claxton. They were without Spencer Dinwiddie. They were without Dennis Smith Jr. Basically 4 rotation players, 3 starters. Mikal Bridges was available, but you just can't lose after 0-3 trip. You come back home to face an undermanned Nets team, and you're up by 16 and up by 15 midway to late in the third quarter, and you lose that game at home. It's alarming. I'm not saying like it's early.
We're 5 games in. This is our first episode of the season.
Right. But you after this homestand, you have 9 of 10 games on the road. You wanted to build a little bit of a cushion here, or at least stay around 500. If you enter that stretch and let's say split the next 2 games and they're 2-5 entering 9 of 10 on the road.
Yeah.
Yes, this team was overcome a lot, but this could go in the wrong direction very quickly with the way the schedule is set up.
So let's start with tonight, because a lot. You mentioned the injuries. 3-game road trip early in the season. Like it's a tough start to the season,
sure.
Right? You get 9 of 10 coming up, as we said. 3 or first 4 were on the road. Wasn't like surprising necessarily. This team came out of the gate slow between the injuries, between the schedule. They lose to, losses to Boston, and there's not a lot of ugly losses on the schedule yet until we got tonight. Loss at Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Only
Minnesota on a
back-to-back. Minnesota on a back-to-back. Right. Jimmy Butler doesn't play in that game. So tonight was the one that was like, if you were kind of harboring like unease about this Heat team, kind of manifested itself tonight. So you are still sitting in the Kaseya Center as we were speaking right now. Anthony, what the heck went wrong tonight?
Well, Brooklyn made a lot of threes in the second half. I think they were 9 of 16 on, that's basically how they won. Kind of like what the underman Heat do when they're, when they're missing guys. They shoot a lot of threes.
They shoot 40 plus threes usually.
Yeah.
Game plan.
This team, they ended up with 36 threes. made 16 of them, but again, 9 of them came in the second half. Second half. And the Heat's offense just went cold in the fourth quarter. I think they ended up shooting like 30% in the fourth quarter, which has been a trend this season. They have not been a good fourth quarter team. I think they've lost 4 of the 5 fourth quarters. They shot 37.5% from the field and 3 of 11 on threes in the fourth quarter. And Brooklyn scored 34 points in the fourth quarter. So, you know, Eric Spoelstra said it, like, this team needs to sustain. He used that word 3 or 4 times during his post-game press conference, like the team needs to sustain. We see good glimpses. We see flashes of maybe what this team can be when it's working, but there's too many times where there are lulls and it's like a totally different team, you know, and that's killing them, and that killed them tonight. That fourth quarter basically lost them the game.
Yeah.
And again, that's been an issue throughout the first week of the season. The fourth quarter has been a struggle. And the interesting thing is, last year they played a lot of clutch games, which is well documented, and they won a lot of those clutch games.
Yeah.
I think they won. They were 10 games over 500 in the clutch last year. This year, you know, I think they're 1-2 to start in the clutch, but if you look at the fourth quarter numbers, you know, they're just not as good as last season. It's early, very small sample size, but this team got to the play-in basically by winning close games. And so far, the fourth quarter trend is not encouraging.
Yeah, because the big flaw you talk about is like the inability to sustain offense, and I mean that was the Heat's biggest flaw last season, right? Like, how many times did they blow? And I know everyone in the NBA does it now, but how many times did they blow 17-point second quarter leads, or you know, jump out to a big lead and then just the bench comes in and nothing happens for 7 minutes? Like, that was the story in a lot of ways of last season, or it would have been the story of last season if it wasn't for how good the Heat were in fourth quarters, where they were pulling out all these close wins.
Yeah.
Even, you know, they had a negative point differential last year, right? They finished with like, we're only 5 games in, but typically those numbers even out. Usually it evens out over the season. Those close wins wind up somewhere around 50-50. Although this is probably the same in the NBA as it is in baseball or something like that, because, you know, he can just put it in Jimmy Butler's hands and he's so good in late game situations. But generally it evens up somewhere around 50-50. That would be the concern with me if I'm a Heat fan, is like, and again, I know it's like kind of not logical, but just like being a numbers, like a guy who is interested in numbers and stuff like that. They kind of sometimes numbers like that tend to even out over seasons. Like, 1 year a team will win 1,000,001 run. Again, I think baseball is the realm where you see this more, where 1 year a team will win 1,000,001 run games, and the next year they lose 1,000,001 run games, and 1 year they go to the World Series, and then the next year they don't make the playoffs because of it.
Yeah.
Some of that, you know, again, basketball's so different, but like, that's the feeling I have coming out of the first week of this season, is like, in some ways it's so similar to last year already. Like, it feels like I'm watching the same Heat team that I watched for so much of last year, but they're just blowing it in the fourth quarter every night, as opposed to last year, where they either would come back or fend off a late round. Like, they were always pulling games out that they kind of had no business winning.
Yeah. I agree with all that. And their offense, again, like, I know that's like the story right now through the first week. Like, the offense isn't good. The offense wasn't good last year. Like, it
was bad. Where did they finish in offensive rating in the regular season? It was like
26 or something like that.
Like mid-20s. Yeah.
Yeah, they're 24th right now. I think the most concerning thing, again, it's 1 week, but through what we've seen, that's all we can go by. What we've seen.
Right.
Yeah. 5 games. They're the 24th best offensive rating, so bottom 7, 8, and they have the 7th best 3-point percentage. So much of their offensive struggles last year was based on them just not hitting threes.
Yeah, and that was also kind of like a normalization thing, where the year before they were the best 3-point shooting team in the league, and last year kind of felt like all that regression was catching up to them, and this year, you know, this is probably closer to where they actually are. Right, they're probably a top 10 3-point shooting team, but continue.
Yeah, they're one of the worst offensive teams for the first week while shooting.
While shooting
decent amount of their threes. It's just that they're not taking a ton of threes. They're shooting
Mhm.
33 a game, which is like 19th most in the league. They're shooting a bunch of mid-range shots again, not getting to the rim. Kind of the same, almost the same shot profile as last season. It's just, I don't know. I think entering tonight, the only team taking a higher percentage of mid-range shots were the Phoenix Suns, and they have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. So
And
like,
Bradley
you can
Beal.
understand
Yeah,
that.
I know Beal hasn't played,
Yeah.
but yeah, like
Like-
they're constructed to take a bunch of mid-range shots.
The Heat, yes, they have Jimmy Butler and they have Tyler Hero and Bam will all take mid-range shots, but it's just not the same. I just, we've seen it. We saw it last regular season. We're seeing it now. It's just not a good offensive formula. I don't know how anybody could expect anything different at this point. They're gonna have to win games behind defense, just like it did last year, and win close games. Because you're not scoring a high amount of points. A lot of times it comes down to the fourth quarter. Their defense right now is 17th best in the league, according to defensive rating. Last year they were top 10. They're gonna have to be a top 10 defense again to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty clear. And can they be a top 10 defense with the personnel they have? That's a question that we'll see over the next few months if that can, if Eric Spoelstra can make that happen, because he has a history of just kind of making any roster a top 10 defense.
I have to imagine the plan coming into this year was to have a top 10 defense, right? Like when they envision the way that they're going to be they want to be more than a play-in team or a playoff team, right? Like the East is, as we said last week, behind the top two. It did not seem unfeasible that the Heat could be the number 3 seed and be considered kind of the third best team in the East. I mean, considering they went to the finals last year, but that recipe has to be top 10 in offense. I do think a little. I mean, again, they're 1-4, as you mentioned, worst record since 2008. So it's like bad by basically any measure you can come up with. But I do think the beginning of the season, I felt the same way. Last year and after the bubble season, like the beginning of Heat seasons are kind of jarring because we're so used to watching the playoff Heat,
where it's like version of the Heat,
where it's Jimmy Butler. I mean, and the big difference there is like Jimmy Butler is playing, skill wise like Michael Jordan sometimes, but also just like every possession he's playing like it's the most important thing that's ever happened. And then we get to the regular season, and like most NBA stars, Jimmy Butler is taking, 30% of the game off, right? They're just like, taking offensive possessions off, who's always playing hard on defense. But it's jarring because you're like, this team was so good 4 months ago or whatever when the playoffs were happening. And, if this Heat team gets to the playoffs, they're going to be better because it's just what we know now. Like, that's how this team is constructed. They're always going to be a better playoff team than they are in the regular season, probably. I guess I say that even though they were the 1 seed 2 years ago. But
but your point is well taken. It's a different team in the playoffs.
It's a different team.
It is. Because Jimmy Butler's a different player in the playoffs.
But as you mentioned, like, the way the Heat is playing now, again, we're 5 games in, like, it's not a lock that they make the playoffs. They were how many minutes away from getting? They were down with like 4 minutes left in an elimination play-in game. Like the margin for error is not, for a team that just went to the finals. Like the margin for error is not that big because they weren't the 3 seed that like could all of a sudden be like, all right, we'll take a month off and that drops us to a 6 seed or whatever. If you play any worse than you did last year, you're not getting to the playoffs basically.
Yeah, and I think we talk about Jimmy Butler, and I think we should probably dig a little deeper into that. He's shooting 35.7% from the field during the first week, which again is not Jimmy Butler like. He was on
even in the regular season, right? Like even in the regular season, he's super like he might not be as aggressive, but he's always insanely efficient.
Yeah, his advanced metrics usually are like right up there with Jokic a lot of times.
Right.
In the regular
exactly.
Season. He's a very efficient player. And whether it's because he didn't play in the preseason, he's working himself back into rhythm or working himself into shape, I don't know. He was on the injury report before the game for right knee tendonitis, which the right knee is the one that's been giving him issues for the past few years that he had to kind of manage last season, missed a couple weeks, didn't play back-to-backs because of the right knee. Is it the right knee that's giving him issues and he's not getting a lot of lift on it? We don't know, right? But that is concerning this early in the year for him to be on the injury report because of right knee tendonitis when we know that right knee has given him problems recently. So that is definitely one thing to watch and one thing to be concerned about, because if Jimmy Butler is not going to be himself or is going to have to miss extended stretches and you start out 1-4, again, it's 1 week.
Right. Yeah.
But, there are reasons to really, really be concerned about, what this could look like in a couple of weeks, just because of Jimmy and so far how he's looked, and also the schedule. They have some winnable games coming up, but a lot of them are on the road. They have to find a way to get through this next 3-4 weeks, hovering around 500. So that way, when they get out of it, they can maybe make a little run and, get above 500. Because if they come out of this 7-8 games under, it's going to be tough.
Yeah. We talked last week about how this Heat team was really excited about their depth. As we mentioned, Caleb Martin missing tonight. Jaime Jaquez steps into the starting lineup. But the Heat get 24 points combined out of their bench, plus 2 from Jaquez, who's the replacement in the lineup. Is the depth good enough on this team? That's been such a calling card for this team. I know you said they were pretty optimistic about it. Jaquez he's a rookie, I'm not going to be too hard on a rookie in his situation, but 1 for 9 from the field, 2 points tonight. Josh Richardson, 6-man, 1 for 9, 4 points. And those are kind of your, when you don't have Caleb Martin, and those are your small forwards. So
yeah.
Well, how do you feel about the depth of this team through a week?
It's tough to say, right? Because again, they've missed multiple, sometimes 3-4 rotation players in each of these games.
Right.
Tonight it was just 2, and Kevin Love and Caleb Martin. So you're really only missing 1 prime bench guy. But yeah, I entered this year thinking depth was a strength. And I think it still can be a strength. But so far, whether it's because Josh Richardson is just coming back from injury, and again he working himself into rhythm, and Haywood Highsmith just came back, made a season debut tonight, so he's not 100%. He's on a minutes limit. Jaime Jaquez has been on a minutes limit. But yeah, the bench hasn't been as good as we expected. Thomas Bryant, there was so much talk about him creating, making those non-BAM minutes. Maybe not a positive, but just kind of letting the Heat survive those minutes. Tonight he was a -9. The Heat were a +5 when Bam was in the game, so they lost the game during the time Bam was on the bench. So yeah, that was supposed to be a strength. That needs to be a strength for this team to reach its full potential. And so far it hasn't. A, because maybe some guys are not performing up to expectations, but B, because they just haven't had their full rotation intact or even close to it at all so far this season.
I think the one good thing coming out of week 1 is your Tyler Hero to lead this team.
I was about to say,
pick looks really good right now.
Yes, that's the one thing I'm hanging my hat on. He's averaging 26.2 points a game on 44% from the field, 43% on threes. Tyler Hero is playing well. He had a bad shooting performance or two, a couple of games ago, but these last 2 games, I think 30+ each game. Really good games by him.
Obviously, I'm joking about that being the good sign from this season, but it's that's a good sign, right? If you told me that through 5 games Tyler Hero was averaging 26+ points a game, I'd be like, oh, this seems pretty good then. Not ideal that Jimmy Butler is averaging 15 points a game. But if
Bam is playing well. Bam 22 points on 51% shooting.
Yeah, if those I think we literally had this conversation either last week or the week before. We're we know Jimmy. I think this is probably after the Lillard trade we talked about. We know Jimmy's the number 1 guy on the championship team. He has been that for the entire time he's been in Miami. The question is Bam? Do Bam and Tyler make up by some combination? Can they be the number 2 and number 3 guys on a championship team? And I'm not. Again, we're 5 games in the regular season, and Tyler is, there's much more to basketball than scoring a lot of points. But those guys have done. We talk about Pat, kind of putting the onus on those guys, right? It was the story. That was what it was when we talked about your interview with Pat. That the pressure was on those guys, right? It was can they? That's going to be the difference for this team. If they can go up a notch, then we can really be contenders here. And the most positive thing you can take out, I think, of the first week of the season is those guys look like they're at least capable of rising to the occasion. Again, it's a small sample size, and and Tyler Hero can get on heaters like this. Like, how many times in his career has he averaged 26 points over a 5-game stretch? It's probably a decent little amount. But, if it feels like you've got a 1-2-3 that's pretty good, assuming Jimmy can be Jimmy, and then obviously the depth behind them is has to play well too.
Yeah, and the numbers when Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler are on the court are good.
Yeah,
they're outscoring teams by 5 points per 100 possessions in the 3 games they've played together so far. So, like, when they're on the court, the team has been successful, and they've been those minutes have been a positive. But it's just like you said, the depth, which was supposed to be a strength, just hasn't been so far. And those 3 on the court, they've only played 3 of the 5 games together. So basically, almost half the games they've missed. They haven't had like all 3, the full complement of their leading trio. So yeah, I think we've talked so much about the negatives.
Yeah, like the reason for like pivot this. We're 5 games in. We can't just be all negative unless you're watching the Wizards. Like everyone else has a shot. Right,
and I mean, again, there are reasons to be concerned, but if you're looking at encouraging things or like reasons to maybe hope that better things on the horizon, the schedule has not been easy, right? That 3-game trip, that was
play at Boston, at Milwaukee, and like you said, at Minnesota on a back-to-back. Like
at Boston.
The only game on there that you're like, what the heck happened, is the one we're talking about right now, is that Nets game.
Yeah, obviously you want to win one of those 3 games, ideally, right? But at Boston's home opener, like that's a tough game to win. Back-to-back. Believe me, I traveled to Minnesota from Boston on that back-to-back. It's a 3.5-hour flight.
They have better planes than you, though.
That's true, but still, it's a 3.5-hour flight for whatever plane it is. They might be more comfortable in that plane, but still get in pretty late. And Jimmy didn't play in that Minnesota game.
Yeah, right. That was the thing.
And then Milwaukee, you're missing Bam and Caleb, and like 2 other guys, and again on the road against Dame and Giannis, like that, it's tough to win that as well. So the schedule has not been easy. The one glaring loss, again, like you said, is this one. And the other reason to maybe have some hope is we just haven't seen this team healthy yet. So let's see. Hopefully they'll get back to full health or close to full health soon. They'll get Caleb back, I still think Caleb's the 4th best player on the team, right? As an all-around like weapon, and missing him for 4 of the 5 games has hurt them. So let's see when everyone gets back, when schedule kind of normalizes. But again, the problem is that they have another really long, grueling road stretch coming up. So it'll be really interesting to see how they respond to this loss and kind of how they come out of this next stretch.
Yeah, a tough stretch, and as we noted, like a team that just does not have that same margin for error that you would like. Again, I think the perception of this team is skewed a little bit because of what we saw 5 months ago. Like this team struggled to make the playoffs for a lot of last year. And again, this is a team, I mean, I think we even said it throughout last year. It's like you get into the playoffs. What was my joke going into the playoffs? Is like they're 5 wins away from a championship or to go into the finals, because you just know those series are going 7 or 6 when the Heat are in them and Jimmy's playing. But it's not easy to make the playoffs. When you especially when you potentially dig yourself a little hole. The good news for the Heat is that they've got the Wizards coming to town this weekend, who are quite terrible.
That is true. Another thing I will say is, even though a lot of the guys returned from last season's team, like one thing I found surprising and kind of tells you like maybe continuity isn't a strength, is that the preferred starting lineup of Kyle, Jimmy, Tyler, Kevin Love, and Bam, that starting 5 didn't play at all together last season.
Yeah, I was gonna say though, it is interesting looking at this team that like we were talking so much about the continuity, but like even just like the rotation. And I know Josh Richardson, obviously, like a new, and Thomas Bryant, like 2 new guys are in there, but like just like the rotation like doesn't feel the same, even though it's only like, I mean, I guess with Caleb out, it's 3 of the 9 guys who played tonight are new, so that's a relatively significant number. But I mean, like Haywood Highsmith is playing like 20 minutes a game, and he was like an in and out kind of guy, right? Like wasn't always in the rotation. Obviously Duncan like had his first where he was out of the rotation. Like,
yeah,
it's like just looking at like the box score, it's like it does not look like anything like the same team as last year, even though as you said, it's similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, even like up to 2 games ago, Drew Smith was playing like 20 minutes a game, who was not even on the roster for some of the season last year. So, and then he was a two-way guy, and so yeah, like yes, many faces are the same, but the lineups, the combinations, even the starting five, which is all those 5 guys were on the team last year, then the season, they never played together.
Yeah,
because of Tyler Hero's injury in the playoffs, he missed the whole postseason, and Kevin Love getting there late, like. So it might take a minute for these guys to find that continuity again. It's just you want to see them pull out some of these close games, right? And you don't want to see. I mean, even that Pistons game, I think they were up like by 20 or more than 20.
Yeah.
And they end up winning by 1.
At 1 point. Yep.
It's just these lulls that are killing them. They're having good stretches, but then there are these stretches where they're outscored by 15 points in a matter of 6 minutes, and that decides the game. So. Yeah, it's not great, not to start anybody expected, but it is still early, and we're going to find out a lot about this team, I think, over the next few weeks.
Yeah. All right, Anthony. I think they're about to throw you out of the Kaseya Center like you're Jazz from The Fresh Prince. So
that or lock me into this room. I'm not sure.
One or the other. So we will wrap things up there. You can follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony_Chang. You can follow me on Twitter at DBWilson2. We will be back next week, hopefully with a little bit more uplifting conversation. I was not expecting to have to be this negative, as I said, the first episode of the regular season. But I think bad vibes tonight, right? And kind of, I think coming out of the road trip, everyone was like, ugh, like,
yeah,
all right, well, whatever, it's early, and then tonight was we had to come on and be a little negative tonight. I think we struck the right tone here.
Tonight was supposed to be a get back game.
Right, exactly.
It was a perfect situation. You're facing a team that, again, doesn't have 3 starters. You're getting back home. Like, you need this one. You have Jimmy Butler and Tyler playing together. And for them to be up 16 and lose, it's just it's disappointing. And it's just not the way you wanted to start this homestand. But the good news is the only thing that matters is Friday, because that is the start of group play in the in-season tournament.
Oh, we didn't even talk about that. We'll do that next week. We got to talk some in-season tournament at some point here.
That Wizards Heat game, you better watch.
I forgot that's a group stage game.
Yeah.
So maybe the Wizards will be fired up for that one. Yeah. You see Jordan Poole threw an alley-oop off the backboard while down 20 tonight? That was pretty exciting.
I did not see that, but I did see his lackadaisical turnaround 3 and
where he got swatted by
Porzingis.
Yeah. He's quickly entered the legacy of great Wizards knuckleheads with Nick Young and Andre Bloch and JaVale McGee and Gilbert Arenas, the best Wizards player of my lifetime, allegedly pooped in a teammate's shoe once. So they've really got them all.
Whoa, I didn't know that one.
You never heard that story? I'll send you some literature.
Okay. I'll read that when I get home tonight.
All right. All right. Thanks as always for listening. We'll talk to you guys later.